everybody, welcome back. JP the Third here, VMs now, and we are back with more Suzerain. I am attempting a new audio. It's weird. Look, I mean, there are times where I absolutely blow out the mic, and I hear myself blowing out the mic. So I've been trying to adjust the audio to where it is a much better mix. I feel like I need to get one of those standalone mixing, like audio mix controllers or something like that, monitors. I don't know. These are things that we are working on as we become a slightly more professional stream. And thank you for your patience. Again, it's going to take a little time, a little bit of an investment, but for now, I think this is a little bit better than what I was pushing out before, and I will just do it like this. Let me know what you think in the comments. Now, when we left off, we had we're on turn 2. We had just decided to release a statement condemning Runeberg for their heinous actions against the state. Now what we'll be up to. Remus Holstrand criticizes workers' rights bill. Remus Holstrand, Nazi, recently voiced objections to the workers' rights bill, currently in its conceptual phase. His criticism targets the bill's fifth section, which extends the same rights to migrants or undocumented workers as to Swedish citizens. That could be a sticking issue with the conservative side of the party. We'll have to see. Although, we may be able to negotiate that down. Our budget is ridiculous right now. We're going to have to at some point start spending money. Just because, we can't keep hoarding the cash, although... Hold on. I don't think... Did we start with... No. We did the state company. The state company is only -1 budget, not -2. Very nice. Troubling news coming from the mayor of Enrica, who reported that a state of chaos exists in the city and called an emergency directive, authorizing him to use his security powers. So the gang warfare is getting worse. We are going to have to act at some point. A significant development unfolding in the Grand National Assembly as the process to repeal the Energy Protection Act of 1932 was initiated. This act, presently restricting foreign ownership of security-sensitive energy corporations to 20%, is now under threat. Vocal advocate Franz Richter of the PFJP and USP reformist wing leader Alban Clavin argued that repeal could stimulate economic growth and foreign investment. However, opposition from the United Sordland Party and the National Front Party remains, protecting Swordland's strategic industries from foreign control. We'll see where it lands. Alfonso Foundation, a beacon of charity. Today we highlight the efforts of the Alfonso Foundation, a beacon of charity in Sordland, founded by Ewald Alfonso, the third president of Sordland. The foundation has taken strides towards mitigating income inequality and addressing homelessness. Committed to long-term solutions, the foundation works tirelessly to promote fair wages, improve access to education, and champion policies favoring economic balance. Addressing the skilled foreign worker gap, the Swedish economy faces a critical challenge: the demand and supply gap for skilled foreign workers. With increasing technological advancements, the need for specialized skills is on the rise. However, the inability to attract and retain foreign talent hinders Sordland's potential for economic growth. Unrest continues. The unrest in the streets is continuing, and the tension between different groups has led to new clashes with hundreds wounded and sometimes several dead a week. Our reporters have interviewed dozens of protest leaders from the regional capitals, revealing different demands from the people. 3 subjects stand out: freedom of expression, democratic change, and economic security. On the other hand, many also went out to protest the worsening living conditions under the recession. Lovely. Calling for an open market repealing of the EPA, the hallowed halls of the Grand National Assembly of Sordland were recently alive with spirited debates concerning the Energy Protection Act of 1932. Franz Richter of the People's Freedom and Justice Party, an independent MP Monson Lake, tabled a proposal to repeal the EPA, currently restricting foreign ownership of security-sensitive energy corporations to 20%. This is a significant move as it brings to fore the crucial issue of market openness and foreign investment. This repeal, we believe, can catalyze economic growth and bring foreign direct investment to a market long protected from international competition. The oligarch must embrace the changing global economic order or risk lagging behind. I would argue a mild agreement to that, but as we discussed in the last stream, Rizia is a proponent of opening up our energy markets, and they are fans of Roomberg. Well, they're not fans of Roomberg. They are in bed, literally, with Roomberg. Any effort to, I don't even know. Well, let me take that back and rephrase it another way. If we were in a situation where we had to be at war with Roomberg for some reason, maybe because they were aggressive dicks, that could lead to an issue on our end if our energy market was in the hands of their ally. So, it's a national security concern, definitely, but there may be a way to thread that needle. Here, that's what I was trying to click. We have long demanded the expansion of civil rights and with reforms to modernize our nation. When the previous government blamed the Supreme Court for not allowing the reforms, the opposition was quick to point out the flaws within the Constitution and brought focus on reforming the governmental structures to open way for further civil reforms. Now, the reformers have increased in number, and with the president who is seen as a symbol of change in office, we are waiting for results. Whether it is the leader of the opposition or our current president, someone has to break the cycle and rewrite the Constitution made by Tarquin Saul, whose cult of personality has shaped our current divided national spirit and must be broken. Fair enough. Energy tensions escalate in Rizia, just speaking of. And a recent development, Less Power, the largest energy corporation of the ATO member Lesbia, announced an energy deal with Pelez over a disputed sea gas field in Ares. Over the disputed sea gas field Ares. Got it right. Rizia, which had laid claim over these fields, is likely to see an escalation in tension. The Alliance of Nations, through its mechanism Andor, has been closely monitoring the situation, attempting to defuse the issue diplomatically. And as energy resources become a major bargaining chip, this event adds another layer of complexity to regional politics. Yeah, it's not as simple as just opening up the market and nothing bad will happen. The response to the Roomberg constantly closing in Lockman was quick. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs sent a strongly worded official diplomatic condemnation letter accusing Roomberg of destabilizing Sordland and its surrounding region. Several nations have made supporting statements for Sordland in the Alliance of Nations. It is clear that this letter is not just directed at Roomberg, but to all surrounding countries observing the serious situation. So that was the right call. The Communist Party of Sordland and Labor Union has set up a picket line in the city. The two organizations, after recently moving to the Gassam HQ in the city, are actively expressing their discontent. The situation is attracting attention, with the impact on the city's daily functioning yet to be determined. So we have widespread labor protests against Gassam. A detained young Sword member in RV claimed that he had connections to the local government. We have been investigating the truth of his claims, but we're not able to find any further leads for now. Investigations about the case will be continuing. And we have one international report. Go ahead and click on that. CSP unveils comprehensive Iyataki plan for weak infrastructure and a calculated effort to expand its geopolitical sway. Container Security Pact, spearheaded by Vice Secretary Chairman, I am not going to try and pronounce that, has unveiled a colossal investment scheme aimed at revolutionizing Rika's infrastructure and education sectors. As the continent of Rika emerges as a fresh battleground in the global tug of ideologies, an increasing number of revolutions embracing millennialism and Voxlanian socialism indicate a shifting landscape. A lot is happening kind of all at once. Oh, wrong button. Here we go. We have the Grand National Assembly is preparing the Green Bill with a focus on promoting sustainable industry practices, particularly in Groenie. Section 1 of the Act proposes stricter regulations on industrial pollution and waste disposal. It suggests heavy fines for non-compliance with the collected revenue to be reinvested in environmental recovery projects. We've already read that. Tourism and Cultural Preservation Act. This is what David was talking about in the last one. The Sordland Tourism and Cultural Preservation Act aims to amplify the cultural allure and tourism viability of Bourne, Ribery, Lochvin, Enrica and Benfi, the Grand National Assembly is calling the collective push to establish Sordland as a global tourist destination and reduce the effects of recession. Section 1 focuses on cultural elevation of these cities, identifying local food, drink, music, dance, architecture, and historical sites as unique selling propositions. This cultivation and cultural tourism is positioned as a catalyst for economic invigoration. Got it there. Section 2 underscores the restoration and preservation of key landmarks in Lochvin and Enrica. Concurrently, it proposes a comprehensive renovation of tourist infrastructure in Benfi to enrich the visitor experience and generate steady income for local communities. Section 2, subsection 1 further commits to safeguarding and development of the caves of Antera in Ribery and vineyards in Bourne, recognizing their potential as tourism growth drivers. Yeah, I'm fine with this. Finally get to sign a bill. Look at that. Still a few things we gotta work on, but we did one good thing. We did one. Hopefully more good things will follow. Reform Committee. I came a little early to the meeting room before anybody showed up. We had scheduled a meeting to discuss the progress of the Reform Committee regarding the new Constitution. I took a seat on the Senate chair in a vacant meeting room as I waited for them to show up. The reforms were slowly becoming the most significant expectation of my government. We would be changing Saul's Constitution of 29. Most people nowadays blame the Constitution for the outstanding problems of the country. On the other hand, yeah. Hold on. It's coming through. I'm trying not to have the music blasting in my ears. That would be nice. Hopefully it's still coming through clear. On the other hand, the reformers in the Assembly have been getting louder about their demands. What I knew for sure was that I needed to do something about this encroaching chaos before it swallowed me. Meanwhile, Lucian, Peter, and Nia have been leading the committee to prepare an initial draft for the constitutional amendments. I was intrigued to hear the results. There was a knock on the door. It was Lucian. Good afternoon, sir. Lucian arrived exactly on the hour mark. His punctuality could almost be described as obsessive. Afternoon, Lucian. He took a seat on the table and took out a bunch of documents, spreading them on the long table. We should begin the meeting as soon as Mrs. Mortna and Mr. Vice President arrives. We finally have some results from the Reform Committee. How does it look? Well, the situation is quite complicated, but I'm sure we will make it work, just like we accomplished many things before. We'll go over the details regarding the new Constitution in the meeting. A few minutes later, Peter and Nia arrived. After a short chat, everyone sat down and took out their notes. I knew it was going to be a long meeting. There's a lot to talk about the future of this process. Let us begin to tackle the points of contention. Mr. President, our committee meetings were really fruitful, and we already started working on the constitutional draft together with the reformists. They demand a little too much, but we had success with First Richter to create a realistic draft that could potentially go to the Supreme Court. A little? They demanded to rewrite the whole Constitution. Mr. Richter's deputy even suggested removing the term sword from the Constitution completely. Yeah, that wasn't going to fly. I also didn't like their theatrics, but the requests were definitely not outrageous. They were just not realistic in today's political circumstances. Nonetheless, Mr. Vice President, thanks for your convincing arguments. Thanks for your convincing arguments. We seem to have reached a common ground already. If we can fully reach an agreement with the reformists, we will be very strong in the Assembly to propose the change. Can we reach a 2/3 majority in the Assembly? If you can get First Richter to work with you on this, our only problem would be uniting our own party. We'll never be able to get the NFP to work with us. We need a majority of our 130 seats in the Assembly to vote in favor. With PFJP's full support of 70 votes, we will easily surpass the needed 166. But it'll be tough to unite the USP with all the divisive wings that have formed. You must make them follow you loyally. We did it before for the elections. We can do it again. Alban Clavin and his reformist wing will be supporting you. He already weighed in heavily in the committee meetings. However, the conservatives will be tough to break. The influence of Saul is still living strong in the party. How many votes do they have in total? The Conservatives have around 40 seats. There are many unaligned people, and some of your loyalists might decide to show their true faces too. So we need as many of the conservatives. So we need many of the conservatives to support us. And there's only one person who is key to make them back us. Gloria Torre. She's well respected by the Sordlands. She'll be our biggest obstacle in the assembly, and her demands will be extensive. I also have reasons to think she might be in Ortho's pocket. She'll be tough to break, but we'll need her help to get the conservative support. Is it possible to pass this? Is it possible to pass this through the Supreme Court? They are the biggest obstacle. Even if we pass the assembly, the Chief Justice will do his best to block our amendments. We need at least 6 of the 11 judges to vote for the proposal, but Mr. Hawker has enormous influence over the judges. We should reach out to the judges in secret. Some of them might be willing to break rank to support us. They will surely support a just cause for the country and its future. Lucian looks skeptical. According to the Constitution, I am a member of the Supreme Court, which means we already have 1 vote. 2 of the judges are friends of mine and of similar opinion about the reforms. Consider them with me. Who else would be willing to support reforms? I think Judge Edmonds can be persuaded, and in extension, Mr. Dalton and Mr. Merton. They weren't really blinded by the Sordland ideology. Yes, those 3 don't seem to be working directly with Chief Justice Hawker. If we can get to Isabel Edmonds, we might get the 6 votes needed. That's our best bet. Let's go through the draft details. Of course. We'll go through each of the main demands of the committee and get your input. Mrs. Morton can explain them further. We'll start with the first red line. The new Constitution will fix the loopholes regarding the President's absolute veto powers. Even though Mr. Richter put on a whole show about why veto should be completely removed, the committee has almost unanimously... Okay. It's funny, I just bulldozed through... Excuse me. I just bulldozed through 11 different articles pretty smoothly. Then we get to the dialogue. Even though Mr. Richter put on a whole show about why veto should be completely removed, the committee has almost unanimously agreed on fixing the loopholes, thus limiting presidential vetoes. My suggestion is to add a clause detailing the methods of the Assembly may override a veto with some sort of supermajority. One person should never be able to block the rest. The loopholes give the president too much power, which could be misused. Whatever you decide, it's important to get a balanced picture. We'll be making history by changing the 29th Constitution of Saul. The second one is about the judiciary. The new Constitution removed the Supreme Court's right to vote on legislation. This is yet another point that was unanimously agreed on by all parties. Tarkin Saul established this rule to protect his 29th Constitution. We all know most of the judges are still his pawns. Constitutional amendments will still be very difficult to accomplish with a reform like this, particularly because we will keep the 2/3 vote system to be able to propose a change. However, the judiciary will not have the final say in the amendments. This is already what our administration wanted to do. Yes, this will ensure that there won't be another politically motivated Supreme Court. Apart from these 2 critical points, they have other major demands. They want to reform the appointment procedures of the ministers. Mr. Richter clarified that the Assembly should have a say in the formation of the Council of Ministers. That is something that a majority in our party also supports. Well, Mr. Richter also talked about abolishing the member of honor rights of Tarkin Saul that gives him absolute immunity and makes him a permanent member of the Assembly. Well, that's a controversial one. I doubt the USP would like that. Immunity of the justices, the impeachment of the president, limiting the power of the presidential decrees. All of this came up during the committee meetings. Yes, reformers expect big reforms, while our faction and USP are not very keen on pushing changes that are too great. I say keeping everything in the middle ground is the safest bet. No need to agitate anyone too much. If you remember, Peter's politics are literally dead in the middle of the political spectrum of this country. Like, you can't get any more narrow than him. They have valid concerns that we need to look at. I'll keep working with them and keep you updated, Mr. President. Well, regardless of what Mr. Rayne decides, we will need to work together to push this agenda. Now we have a better picture of your intentions, sir. I will start reaching out to my contacts to make a draft that works for us. I'll present your input to the committee. In a few months, you will have a draft on your desk to make the final changes yourself. I think this was yet another fruitful meeting, sir. Your service is appreciated. Thank you for the kind words, sir. You can count on us, Anton. Yes, Mr. President. I think this is what we call it, sir. Have a good day. They left the room. Done and done. A lot of new stuff just crossed over to my desk. Economics, Tourism, and Culture Preservation Act is a go. Tourism industry is booming, at least. Hopefully it'll have some positive effects in the future. Minister of the Rural Development, Gus Monger, recently unveiled an ambitious investment plan concept aimed at revitalizing Sordland's rural economies and ensuring the nation's food sustainability, dubbed the Gruny Rural Development Investment. The plan envisions judicious resource allocation to invigorate agricultural communities, strengthening food security, and bolster the regional economy of Gruny. Interesting. Cooperation with Moonberg, an economic imperative. Who writes this? Who wrote this? Amid ongoing geopolitical uncertainties, there is an economic imperative we can't ignore: the potential of our northern neighbor, Roomberg, known for its large energy economy and access to two leading energy corporations, Rizia's Rizian Oil and Gas Corporation and Royal Emerald Energy, ripe for collaboration. These energy giants represent not just the possibility of wealth generation, but also a means of diplomatic softening, aligning mutual interests to avoid future conflicts. By welcoming partnerships, we assure that globalization serves as a bridge, not a barrier. I agree in principle, but I don't know how well that's going to roll out. The CSP's Iataki plan, an ambitious investment scheme designed to revolutionize Rica's infrastructure and education sectors, has received a mixed response from around the world. Western Maricopa and Northern Xena displayed skepticism, their concerns rooted in geopolitical maneuvering and ideological clashes. In contrast, Riga has welcomed the plan warmly, hopeful for the transformation it promises. Caution has been advised by Anraka and York Trollis, who fear a heating up of superpower rivalries, while the plan demonstrates the CSP's commitment to sustainable development. Its perception underscores the complexity of international politics. Unfortunate. Well, I'm saying unfortunate, that's reality. Job freeze spark fears for gas and financial stability. Unsettling rumors are spreading about gas from one of Sordland's largest corporations as the company puts a halt on hiring. This unprecedented move, coupled with a lack of usual job openings, has sparked concern about the company's fiscal stability. Thousands of blue-collar workers across Norable and Lockvin depend on Gaston for development, and the rumors cast an ominous shadow over their livelihoods. There's some positivity about me signing the tourism bill. I'll take it. Incident at President of Sordland's mansion. A private boat near Tarkansas's mansion on Dura Island prompted the Coast Guard to fire warning shots. Despite the initial alarm, former President Tarkansas allowed the boat to approach for a brief conversation. The occurrence has raised questions about the security protocols near the obscure mansion. Details of the conversation remain undisclosed. Oh, that's not helpful. Nature Preservation Foundation is protesting against the remaining coal industry. That's not going to go anywhere. That's not even a point to finishing their report. That's not going to go anywhere. We can only throttle energy so much, even with state capitalism. The mayor of Conneryat, Chris Shaw, reported the decision to start the construction of the L1 high-speed railway project caused industrial investors all over the country to invest money in the region near the city. Good. Even with a state corporation, that is a good sign. Now, Florida State Corporation has reported that preparatory work for the L1 railway has already started, including clearing land and transporting equipment. Everything starts next month. You guys better not make me look foolish. No pressure. The administration has been working day and night on the overwhelming amount of issues that were facing the country. The department sent several documents which required my signature so they could start working on the new decisions that were taken. After I signed dozens of them, I closed my eyes to relax for a moment. Another long day. Even though I really wished to leave the palace for the day, Lucian had earlier told me that the Chief Justice wanted to speak to me. We planned to meet in my office in 30 minutes. I waited for him, wondering what subject he would raise. I poured some whiskey for myself and took a sip. It eased my mind a little. Suddenly I heard a knock on the door. It was Lucian. Good evening, sir. Good to see you. Good to see you too, sir. I'm sorry that I couldn't explain the situation to you in detail earlier, sir. The Chief Justice insisted on seeing you this evening. I do not know what he has to say, but it will probably be about the new Constitution. It will be coming in shortly with Judge... that is just a mouthful. Judge Garassi to the meeting. We shouldn't take them lightly. I think he's here to test the waters. I agree. They'll probably try to get you to their side. We should... There are 3 knocks at the door. Lucian checked his watch. He looked rather worried. Livia opened the door. Chief Justice Orso Hawker and Judge Hearn Garassi entered the room. Good evening, Mr. President. It's great to see you. Evening. Welcome, Justice Garassi and Chief Justice Hawker. Good to see you indeed. Orso gestured at the sofa in the office. May I? Let's have a seat, gentlemen. We took our seats on the 2 opposite sofas and made ourselves comfortable. Orso glanced at the glass of whiskey. Celebrating something, Mr. President? Forgive me, would you also like to have a drink? No, thank you. Me neither, thank you. I have to stay as conscious and focused as I can. How are your first couple of months, Mr. President? I hope you're faring well. Thank you. It's been very busy, but I'm doing good. It will only get busier, yet I think you're doing a good job so far. Considering all that's happening around us, with the shootings near the palace and soldiers on our borders, he let out a deep sigh. It is a troubling time. We appreciate your concerns. So, you probably know why we are here. Please enlighten me, Mr. Hawker. We know you're working on a new constitution. The Supreme Court does not approve of this. With all due respect, sir, the Constitution needs to be updated. With all due respect, the Constitution needs to be updated, sir. I'm sure you are well aware of the public demand in our circumstances. If that's so, I see that you are the one who is not aware of our actual circumstances. You want to make a weaker Constitution in the midst of problems from both inside and outside. Even if your proposal passes the Assembly, I will make sure it will not pass the Supreme Court. That much is clear. You haven't even seen the proposal yet, Mr. Hawker. Isn't it too soon to be against it? Do you think I live under a rock, Mr. President? I know what goes on. Yet you, Mr. President, seem to be only partially informed about the current situation. Please let us explain the reasons of our stance. Oh? Please explain. We're protecting the Constitution because it works, Mr. President. It is efficient and it gives you the authority to lead the nation with swift decisions. Sordland has more important problems and threats that we should face right now instead of nitpicking about some paragraphs of the Constitution. We have a potential war within our borders. Orso signaled Heron with his hand and let him speak instead. Mr. President, I know you're a busy man, so I'll make this quick. We know that the Sword security forces found stashes of Umbergian weaponry in the hideouts of Bluish separatists. K-74s are roaming inside of Sordland at this moment. As much as Rumber poses a direct threat, now it's clear that they are also intervening in our country and weaponizing our minorities against us. It's not unprecedented to think that the Blues will start their terror again with their new toys. Not to mention the fights that broke out between the left and right wing after the shooting of Bernard Circus. Communists are rising with the support of United Cantana. The chaos is imminent for Sordland. And sadly, we don't see the administration taking the necessary precautions. You said you were not focused on the military during your term. Under current circumstances, that cannot be tolerated at any cost. Mr. Harker, the court has no jurisdiction over these matters. Aren't we all part of this state, Mr. President? We are all responsible if Sordland fails to overcome these threats. But regardless of that, are you also aware that the armed Blutish separatists have direct connections with the Workers' Party of Blutia? They claim otherwise. They may claim that they have no ties with the separatists, but most of their members used to be part of them before they formed the Workers' Party of Blutia. How about the name, Mr. President? It is not the Workers' Party of Sordland, is it? As far as I'm aware, there is no nation called Blutia around here. What is this all about? The only reason they are not in the assembly is because of the electoral threshold. They've gotten quite big. They're clearly getting outside help, and their connections to the paramilitary Blutish force cannot be denied. And all of a sudden, the reformers are trying to decrease the electoral threshold so that the Blutish separatists can be legitimized in the assembly to achieve their aims of independence. You think that's Mr. Richter's intention? I suspect his intentions are grander. But I wish the only issues were the Blutish terrorists in Rumburg. Reformers suggested changes would also bring the communists, who are backed by United Cantana, into the assembly. Do you see the pattern yet? You are saying the reformers are working for foreign powers. Haven't you been briefed by your security team? Maybe you should suspect them as well. Yes, suspect everybody but us. We should take the necessary measures against communists and Blutish plots, as well as increasing our military budget against a possible conflict with Rumburg. And of course, not falling into the traps of the reformers by listening to their demands. They're clearly plotting to weaken the president and our whole administration in order to exploit the situation. Which brings us to some very important information that we have. It's definitely something you need to hear, and it can change absolutely everything. With all due respect, Mr. President, I think this is getting slightly ridiculous. Please explain, Mr. Harker. The person in question is Mr. Franz Richter himself, the leader of the reformists. We have enough information to infer that he has ties with Acacia. Acacia is aggressively growing their influence around the world, and now we have Mr. Richter coming up with these ridiculous demands for a new constitution amidst the chaotic period of Sordland. All the pieces seem to fit perfectly. This is why the Supreme Court will be doing what it takes to stop these reforms and preserve the Constitution. How would you know that Mr. Richter has ties to Acacia? Mr. Glade, we all know that he's been to Acacia many times because it's been documented, but what would you think if he had been making hidden flights to the country? He was hiding his flights to Acacia? He was. He's been spotted in a hotel in Acacia last year, where they held the Conference of Economic Development in volatile regions. Right around that time, he started to influence the masses into believing that our Constitution is the reason for everything bad. His trip was not documented, nor was he an official guest of the conference. We believe he had a meeting with President Walker behind closed doors. I also have a couple more photos of him that were taken on occasion in different cities. One is from a couple months back. Again, none of this is documented. He also attended another event in Lesbia last week. The Acadian Minister of Foreign Affairs was there too. How did you find out about this? Many scholars were already following his leads for quite some time, Mr. President. I cannot give away their identities, but I can give you the evidence. He handed me a small file. It contained official documents from the Swordish border guard with highlighted dates that show no trace of Franz Richter's name. There were clear photos of him that were taken in the conference in Acacia, as well as remarks by lesbian and Acadian citizens who claimed to have seen him with Acadian businessmen around the same dates. There are also an official transcript of one of his speeches where he claimed to be in Benfey on the dates of the conference in Acacia, where he was spotted. Let's just skim through the documents with skepticism, which slowly turned to surprise. They seem to be real. Of course they're real, Mr. Glade. These seem to suggest that Acacia is behind the reformists. Their demands only benefit Acacia. They want to have a weaker administration while we face all these threats. This is clearly a plot against Sordland. I bet Rumburg is part of their plan too. This cannot be a coincidence that they are weaponizing our minorities against us around the same time. Now that you understand the reasons of our current stance, and also our suspicions about your advisors, who clearly have not given you this vital information. Lucian gave him a sharp look. We appreciate the information, Mr. Hawker, but I advise against jumping to conclusions right away. We still need to check the information. There isn't much to think or check. This is clearly an emergency. In such cases, the Constitution gives the President the right to use his emergency powers. If we work together, you can be sure that the Supreme Court will not block your declaration of emergency. You want me to declare an emergency? Of course. We cannot wait for the processes of the Assembly to take care of these issues. You must exercise your presidential powers for a fast and effective solution. Which means you might need to suspend parts of the Constitution to give more authority to our security forces to deal with these issues. We must also officially investigate Mr. Richter as well. You can devise a strong security decree if you base it on the Articles 57 and 58, which gives the President the right to suspend parts of the Constitution to deal with national security threats. You can only directly bypass the Assembly in such a situation. You can't. Let me back that up. You can directly bypass the Assembly in such a situation. The only thing you need is the Supreme Court to allow the emergency to be declared, and you have our word on that. Sir, I think this is going a bit too far. We shouldn't escalate things so fast. Mr. President, why don't we talk in private? Only the two of us. We can devise a plan together. I know how we can use the Constitution to our advantage. It would be more effective if Mr. Gallade and Mr. Garassi leave the room before we discuss it. Sir, I advise against it. I'm sorry to say we won't be cooperating, Mr. Hopker. Even though you're aware of our national security threats. You're making a big mistake, Mr. President. We will not allow you to succeed. Gentlemen, I think it's time to end this meeting. Well, thank you for having us, Mr. President. Have a good evening. They both left the room without saying anything else. That's not good. They clearly tried to threaten you. We have to make sure our reforms will pass the court. Also, we'll be doing whatever it takes to damage you. We need to be careful. There's still many old guard sympathizers in our party. We can't let them divide us. And he will definitely try. After a short evaluation of the situation on our hands, Lucian left me in the presidential office. It was obvious that the old guards would be my main rivals for the near future. At last, our true enemy has showed their face. Hawker in the Maroon Palace. Chief Justice Orso Hawker has been spotted entering the Maroon Palace. Our sources are intrigued by the timing of this visit, that is happening right after the increased conversations around the so-called democratic reform. Of course. I don't think there's anything else to do, so next turn. Trials of Democracy. That's not threatening at all. 10 news stories. Radio use rising. Warning bells for Sordland. Recent activities of the radio use seen rallying in Narwhal has set alarm bells ringing. The sudden visibility of the group known for its radical political ideology raises concerns about potential threats to Sordland's national stability. The resurgence warrants vigilance and a closer examination of their intentions and potential influence on our nation's political landscape. School poisoning in Rebel. Police have arrested the principal of a high school in Rebel in southern Berger, where 12 students died after eating a free meal laced with pesticides. The students aged between 15 and 17 died after eating lunch of the local dish of zabla, cooked at the school in a poverty-stricken city. Shame. Upcoming government budget changes. Are we already on the budget? Good Lord. As the top economy experts in the country, we've been watching the upcoming changes to the government budget very closely. President Anton Rayne's first internal economical challenges lie ahead, and we will see if he can prove his capabilities as a leader who can think ahead. The political ramifications of diverting the funding to certain governmental branches have always been a point of contention for any leader, and it's no different in this case. We will see if President Rayne can hold on to the promises he has given during the election campaign. Workers' union put pressure for promised benefits. In a tactical move to accelerate the implementation of the promised benefits, the Communist Party of Sordland and the Labor Union of Sordland have declared a labor strike at Gassam. Their actions seem to serve a dual purpose, exerting pressure on Gassam's management to uphold its commitments, and indirectly reminding President Anton Rayne of the expectations ahead of his meeting with Gassam's chairman, Erwald Alfonso. United in protest. And time for women to stand up. Iraq and Archipelago emerges as buffer zone and global trade power. The Federation of Iraq and Isles a collection of strategically located islands between the continents of Maricopa and Cantana, is positioning itself as a significant buffer zone and global trade power amid escalating tensions between United Cantana and Acacia. The archipelago's unique geographic location allowed it to serve as a conduit for international commerce and diplomacy, fostering a robust trade empire in the process. In a historic move, the member states of the Guild of Royal Allies for Commercial Exchange have announced a series of joint initiatives aimed at counteracting the growing influence of millennialist and Arcasian capitalist ideologies while establishing a parallel financial and trade order. An unprecedented collaboration comes at a time when traditional monarchies are increasingly being challenged by geopolitical shifts and global economic trends. Van Horten blames Walton for the missing fishing vessel. On Tuesday morning, I noticed Prime Minister Van Horten has made a statement denouncing Walton for the missing vessel, hull name ARV-0238. Our dutiful Coast Guards have rescued a member of the crew of the missing vessel. Through his statement, we have learned the ship's unfortunate end was none other than the Valslandian Navy. Oof. Deeply unfortunate. Reports? Oh, I don't have any international reports, but why are we over here? Okay, yeah, nothing. We don't have anything over there. Lockfin. Recession hits farmers. As per the latest news from Lockfin, the farming industry has taken another hit as a result of the recession. There are reports that 60% of all wheat in Lockfin is rotting in barns due to a lack of buyers. We gotta get the market open. Now, Narborough reports lack of hospitals. The mayor of Narborough has reported that their hospitals are overburdened and they are unable to respond to the needs of the citizens. He complained about a month-long waiting list for terminally ill patients. On top of the capacity issues, it was also noted that the facilities are largely using outdated technology. Brutish resistance in sanctuaries. Belgian security forces have arrested 3 priests at 2 different Nuridi sanctuaries in Sarna after finding links to insurgent activities. The report came from an elderly man who wanted to pray in peace, but instead found himself invited to join the Blue Freedom Front by a state-sanctioned priest. Ooh, that's just gonna tick off the fascists, isn't it? A massive counter-protest against young swords led by a local politician known to be allied with the Radius resulted in many injuries and property damage. Subsequently, young swords and National Front Party flags were burnt, which caused tensions to escalate, as they are wont to do. Final report. Communist books burned in Borden. Local residents gathered thousands of books that they claimed to be spreading communist and millennialist propaganda at the Senji Park in Borden and set the books on fire. Aggressive slogans targeting the Red Youth, the Workers' Party of Bludia, and the Communist Party of Sordland were shouted. Youth groups from the local party offices of the USP and NFP also joined with the burning. The fire department were dispatched and the protesters dispersed on their own. Things are just getting hotter. Oh, we're here. Get this report in right quick. This is one of my favorite scenes in the game. The Grand National Assembly was the stage of a contentious debate today over the proposed repeal of the Energy Protection Act of 1932. Arguments both for and against the repeal were put forth, with Friends Director of the PFJP, USP reformist wing leader Alban Clavin leading the faction advocating for the repeal. They argued that such a move will foster economic growth and increase foreign investment. However, the United Sordland Party and National Front Party, under the leadership of Gloria Torre and Gazara Kibner, respectively, defended the act vehemently, citing the need for Sordland to protect its strategic industries from foreign control. The final decision now hinges on the vote, which will be held the following month. Now, it was a Saturday afternoon, my first break from work in what felt like years, and the weather couldn't have been more perfect. Trying to keep my mind off the upheaval sparked by the circus assassination, I lit the backyard grill. Monica and Deanna were out shopping for craft supplies, and I had given the staff the day off. It was just me and Frank at home. I wasn't sure how he felt about me at the moment, but I didn't know how he felt about barbecued ribs. Our cook had left some marinating in the refrigerator. Sure enough, as soon as Frank glimpsed the grill and the meat, he stepped outside to join me. Come to spend some quality time with your old man, have you? Sure, if you can spare a few minutes out of your busy schedule. I'm sorry. I know I haven't been around very often lately, but I'm happy to see you now. It's okay. I know you got the most stressful job in the country, and you got to feed your family on top of it all. We both chuckled. I turned to tend the fire. Here, let me try. He grabbed the fan and started quickly waving it over the coals. The fire roared to life. He looked at me with a grin on his face, as if he was expecting praise. Not bad, son. Not bad. Thank you, sir. It is our utmost interest to fulfill our duties with precision. The grilling shall commence in exactly 1 minute and 32 seconds. That was a spot-on impersonation of Lucian. We looked at each other for a second, then burst out laughing. I realized my throat was parched. There was a 6-pack of beer in the kitchen. Why don't you bring us a couple of beers? He looked at me in disbelief. You mean I can't... But Mom told me... He stopped himself, quickly ran inside, and returned with 2 beers. We cracked them open, cleaned the bottles, and gazed out at the city skyline. For a moment, my thoughts flashed back to my childhood and my relationship with my own father. My father was a poor man who struggled to provide for us on his meager income. He put me to work on the farm long before I was Frank's age, and even then, we couldn't always make ends meet. Yet we were always close as a family. Now that I was the president, I knew Frank would never face the same hardships I had. I couldn't deny I felt a bit jealous. Dad, can I ask you something? We're family. You can ask me anything. It's just, I feel like there's so much you've been hiding from me. About your past, and about what's going on right now. Like at dinner that night after the ball, you told me everything was under control, but it wasn't, was it? I know what happened in the 20s. We learned about it in school. Now with the protests and the riots, is it going to be the same thing? Dad, is there going to be a civil war in Sordland? I hope not. He let out a sigh. But what was it like back then? Uncle Peter said the 2 of you went through a lot. I'm not a kid anymore, you can tell me. Before I could gather my thoughts, the familiar images started flashing before my eyes. Images of soldiers advancing towards me and my friends. Weapons drawn, of people I knew, friends and neighbors being dragged through the streets and murdered in alleyways. And that little girl's face. Those were dark times. It seems like it. But you're nearly a grown man. Let's talk about it. Fran leaned forward in his chair, his eyes wide. It's time to tell him about the coup in 1927. I was barely older than you are now, studying law at Holsworth State University. I was a freshman, excited and young. I had just left the classroom to go back home as I heard the sound of multiple vehicles approaching the campus gates. As they got closer, I realized there were military camouflage trucks and tanks carrying hundreds of soldiers. The same soldiers that were supposed to protect Sordland citizens pointed their guns at us. They immediately took control of the facilities. One of my friends asked me what was going on and was arrested. Asked what was going on and was arrested immediately. More people got angry and gathered in protest. Frank kept listening, a shot look on his face. We did say we were going to be honest. I was marching with the protesters as they declared martial law. We marched towards them. They threatened to use force, but we stood our ground. So they started beating anyone they saw, including me. Physical wounds took a few weeks to heal, but the mental scars have stayed with me to this day. I was still one of the lucky ones. Some of my friends were shot. Many more were arrested. I can't forget the screams to this day. Fran leaned back in his chair, his shoulders slumped heavily. I think we can... Well, he wanted to know it. Well, he wanted to know it all. It was time to tell him about the Civil War. It was right after we met your mother. We had both joined the same human rights group and to push for change after the coup of 27. Eventually, I became convinced I wasn't doing enough, so I joined the Red Youth. Then one night it happened. 2 different factions in the army, one of them led by the fascist General Lutheran, and the other by the socialist General Ricard, started fighting against each other. It was a bloodbath. Nowhere was safe. Franz shifted in his chair, visibly uncomfortable. So we organized a protest one day in support of Rickard. In our minds, he was the better of the 2 and a true socialist. We'll hold off on this part. I'll pause for a moment before continuing. He can only take so much, right? I think in this one you could either tell him about you getting beaten or the girl dying right in front of you. If you try and tell him both, his brain may just break. It was horrible. They were waiting for us. Everything plunged into chaos. Soldiers started beating and shooting at everyone. I trod off. There were some things that my son didn't have to know. That's enough for today. It's okay. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have asked you about it. I know I don't understand how easy my life is sometimes. One more thing, though. I know that you joined the Red Youth back then. Do you mind if I ask why? I had to survive somehow in that environment, and I made a choice. Frank raised his eyebrows, his curiosity still not satisfied, but sensing my reluctance to go on, he simply nodded. Sorry for bombarding you with questions. I know I complain sometimes, but my problems are nothing compared to what you went through. I'm here to listen to them, no matter what they are. Before Frank could say anything else, I heard the front door unlock. Diana and Monica's voices and the sound of rustling shopping bags filled the house. All right, I'll be upstairs until dinner. Frank went in and dashed upstairs. I took a long sip from my beer, looking at the city and the now setting sun. I hoped that talking to Frank about my past had been the right decision. Part of me felt as if some sort of burden had been lifted. But I had the same nightmares again that night. Hands down my favorite scene. It's just legitimately a well-written scene. And we're getting some economic growth. That's not bad. And a crap ton of news stories. We'll get back to them. We'll pick it up with the news stories and our visit to Narble. I believe that's going to be our official visit to the former President Alfonso in that one. And we'll start making some decisions. It's a private corporation. There's only so much we can do, but if there's a way that we can negotiate or figure out a way for it to benefit our economic plans, it could go a long way. So we'll figure out exactly what we need to do there, as well as some other actions. But leave a like if you've enjoyed the video. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. And again, thank you guys for all your support. Suzerain has done, and this is not an official Suzerain channel. We're not a political simulator channel. This is a visual novel channel, and you guys have just fully supported. I still get a lot of questions about strategy, about different events that happen in the game, and I just want to thank not only this community, but the Suzerain community for embracing us as we go through this journey. And my hope is that you will continue to enjoy it. We're not going too far outside of capitalist reformist, but that's only because we haven't had many decisions that allow us to go full free market capitalist. And we're not. Like I said, we're going to stay capitalist route. We're going planned economy, so we'll see what happens. But until then, I'll catch you in the next one.